make the announcement.
Good morning, everyone. Relic wanted me to let everyone know that whoever wins the CTF gets one of those black badges, similar to his, I believe, and that gets you into the con for life. And we also have a book to give away. So, what is the most current version of SET? 2.1. 2.1. Thank you.
Actually, that guy didn't answer the question. He just social engineered me into giving him the book. All right, welcome back to Saturday of DerbyCon, one of the hottest cons of the entire con circuit. It's 9 o'clock in the morning and you're here, so obviously you're not real hackers. And we're about to have a very, very cool talk. If I have to introduce Georgia, you obviously have your Bluetooth and a Wi-Fi turned on your phone. If I don't have to introduce Georgia, you're frantically going, turn off, turn off. Airplane mode on. So with no further ado, smartphone security, the mistress thereof. Let's hear it for Georgia.
Hi everybody. So I got on the stage without falling over. That's +1 for 9 in the morning. So today we're not actually going to talk about attacking smartphones. We're going to talk about fixing them. And so the name of the talk is Throw It in the River with a question mark, because that's really the only way to ensure your smartphone security is put it in the river. But anyway, when I first said I was going to give this talk, people were like, so you're just going to turn in an empty slide deck? Because there's no way to have smartphone security. But we're actually going to talk about some potential smartphone security strategies. So again, I'm Georgia, and this is towards real-life actual smartphone security. So actually what we're going to talk about today is a series of problems in smartphone security that are ubiquitous across multiple platforms. It's, of course, not every problem that they have, but we're just going to talk about 4. We're going to talk about encryption in transit, and the apps, and updating the system, firmware, and then user awareness. So we're going to talk about the problems that are out there across multiple platforms and some ideas about how they can be fixed in a way such that the vendors could just add this on based on what they have and it wouldn't actually break anything or make it really hard. So that's the goal here. Let's see how we do. So notes, most of this is on Android and iPhone because those are the phones I have. I don't have a BlackBerry, I don't have a Windows mobile phone. So any of the research based on that was just me Googling. So it's not actually going to cover that as well as it does the other platforms. If you want to fix that in the future, I do take donations of smartphones. So we're briefly touching on those other platforms, but as for now, kind of in the dark there. And our radio-based topics are GSM, not CDMA, again, because that's the kind of phone I have. So as I was doing the research in my house, that was what we were able to work with. Again, if you want me to cover CDMA in future talks, by all means, give me a CDMA phone. So first off, encryption. That says password in there. I stole it off Google Images. So encryption problems. So this actually looks really technical and in-depth, but basically, one more thing. So usually when you say GSM in these talks, it usually is synonymous with 2G, whereas you say 3G is 3G. But GSM, I'm using it to encompass all of the radio, and when it specifically matters, I'll say 2G, 3G, or 4G. So just a note for that. So encryption in transit is all done over a stream cipher between your phone and your base station, which is where we care the most. For instance, if your phone is on right now, you're talking to a base station out there. So all those encryption channels are going through the air right now as we speak in this room and going off to a base station in my hotel room. Not really, actually. But it could be. It could be, since we heard that at DEF CON, right, someone set up a femto cell and was intercepting traffic. So it could be the case here as well. So that's where we actually care about our encryption, because that is where we can be intercepted. So the encryption level of your stream cipher right now is dependent on what sort of radio communications you're actually doing, be they 2G, 3G, 4G. If you're using 2G, it's really up to the base station whether there's encryption at all. So the base station that you talk to can say, I'm not going to encrypt this channel at all. Of course, your encryption for base stations that are actually part of a cell phone network hopefully have some encryption. Most of them actually use the stream cipher A51, which is broken. Karsten Noel broke that at Black Hat 2010. He showed that you can do this in a matter of seconds. You can break the encryption with just a couple of GPUs and some fast storage for your rainbow tables. So you can basically say that 2G encryption is pretty much dead. But it's a little bit better with 3G. Most of you're probably running 3G, right? Or even 4G. No one uses 2G anymore for their base of their phone. So 3G is also encrypted, and it uses a better stream cipher, A5, not 5A, A53, which is much stronger. It's conceptually broken. You see news reports about it, but the breaking of this requires a lot of known ciphertext, a lot of known plaintext. It's not really the sort of attack you'd see in the wild. So a little bit stronger here. That's great, right? Because what we're worried about here is actually having our smartphone communications intercepted. We actually saw Chris Pageant do this, right? Over 2G, though. He set up a rogue base station at DEF CON last year. And so what he did, since it was over 2G, if you were using 3G, you weren't actually susceptible to this unless he jammed your 3G communications and you switched back to 2G. So it's possible your phones will attach to whatever looks like a legitimate base station, hence why our DEF CON femtocell, since it was right there and on high power, it would attach to that. Your phones will attach to anything that looks like their carrier. And then you're able to intercept all traffic. Since he did this over 2G, all he had to do was spoof the carrier network. So then cryptographically he could say, that's it. Just aside from the carrier network, everything will be in plain text, and I will get to see everything you do, and your phones will work exactly the same. But who uses 2G anymore, right? Anybody here, does their phone not have 3G or 4G on it? No one. Okay, so we should all be fine, right? Everybody's safe from this attack because our phones don't use 2G, right? Actually, no, because your phones are backwards compatible. 4G and 3G and 2G, they're actually not backwards compatible with each other. If you have a 3G radio running, it can't talk to a 2G tower. It just doesn't work that way. But all your current phones, smartphones-wise, like Windows Mobile, BlackBerry, iPhone, and Android, they all have a 2G radio still in them. Some of you may use it. For instance, let's see, when there was a big hurricane that knocked off the East Coast, and I hadn't plugged in my phones for a week because I am an idiot, and then I had to try and save some battery. I switched back to 2G because it uses a lot less battery, so I could maybe keep my phone alive because there was no power in my house. And getting a plug at Panera Bread was really hard since there was no power anywhere. And also, if you're in a really congested area, there's a lot of people on the 3G that there usually aren't. Switching back to 2G could actually make things go faster. You wouldn't think so, but it can. So there's legitimate reasons why you might want to use 2G and not 3G, like those. So your phones all still have this radio in there. The default right now on every phone I looked at was to have the 2G radio on and the 3G radio on, and when it can't get 3G coverage, it switches back to 2G infrastructure just automatically. You'll never even know the difference. I mean, if you look up there and it says Edge instead of 3G, then it's on 2G, but your phone will still work the same. So that's the default on all the phones. So when 3G is not available, it'll use 2G. So what did Chris Pageant do in his talk? He jammed 3G. So if I jam 3G up here, everybody's phone in the room basically would go back to 2G, and thus if I had a rogue base station, it would be interceptable. So as long as 2G is actually still being used, then this sort of attack will still work. Chris Pageant did this almost 2 years ago, yet the same attack would still work. Nobody's done anything about it, right? And this will work on any kind of phone. This isn't just an Android problem. This is a carrier network problem, infrastructure of the entire cell phone system problem. So mitigation 1, just turn off 2G, right? It's an option on all of the phones that I looked at to force 2G only. For instance, like when I was in the hurricane, or some people at DEF CON, if there were too many phones around and they weren't getting good service, then you might say, go into your settings. You just go into settings. You don't have to root your phone to do this. Just go in there and it says, do you want to use 2G only? You can click that, and then your phone will automatically connect to only the 2G networks and not use your 3G or 4G if your phone can do that. However, using 3G Plus doesn't seem to be available on, well, I know it's not available on iPhone 4 or the current Androids, but it does seem to be on BlackBerry. Again, I don't have one, but based on research, that does seem to be an option on that one. You can go into settings and so force it not to use 2G ever, but it doesn't seem to be the case on any of the other ones I look at. So we need to see this setting made available. They can do this. It's the same way. Just don't use that radio. Radio off. We can do that. So we need to see that definitely become an option, and it would be cool if they made it default too. However, if you made it default and you went out of the range of your 3G coverage, your phone isn't going to work anymore. But they could also fix the encryption on 2G, but I don't really see that working either. So I think probably the best thing for your end user is to have the default setting not to use the bad encryption 2G, because we're seeing this attack more and more. So another mitigation, if that isn't going to work, well, all of your GSM data is encoded, not encrypted. The only encryption on any of your communications going out over GSM right now is the stream cipher. So if you're on 2G, definitely breakable, conceptually breakable on 3G. So once I actually get a hold of your communications, then it's just encoded. It's not encrypted. I can get all of your data back. But your smartphones, I mean, they're mini computers. They're really fast. The things my phone does, it plays the YouTube for me. I can go running and play YouTube so I don't have to actually download the music and buy it. It's great. They can do anything that my computer can do. So they definitely have the resources in terms of CPU and memory speed in order to do, basic crypto, definitely. I mean, it can encrypt over the internet through its browser and such, so why can't it do it over GSM? And a lot of them even have tools like OpenSSL. If you root your phone and just type OpenSSL, oh, there it is. It's already there. You don't even have to install it. So I don't see why there's any reason why you couldn't encrypt this traffic easily. In fact, we're going to look at doing it. So a case study. If any of you have been to any of my talks before, you might have seen a slide kind of like this. This is, in fact, an SMS deliver PDU. This is what your phone sees when it gets an SMS. It sees all these values and parses them out nicely and gives them to you. So this is actually what you see. And the interesting parts are the sender number, which is, in fact, just scrambled around. It's just like the 1 and the 5 switch back, the 7 and the 1 switch back, the 3 and the 5, and then it's padded with an F to get the number back. And then your user data is, again, just encoded, not encrypted. It's 7-bit GSM encoding, which you can look up on the internet really easily, and it'll show you how to do this. Again, if you are a computer science professor or otherwise teaching beginning programming, really fun idea for an exercise. Do 7-bit GSM, have them parse this and get the message back. Kind of fun, more fun than what I did when I was in intro computer. So just a thought. So given that PDU, again, it's all reversible. If I can intercept that PDU, I know who sent it to you and what they said. And so example, that message back there actually decodes to hello, hello, which just seems to be what everybody uses for their examples on cell phones. It's like foobar for cell phones, who knows. And sorry, if you want to get my phone number, you actually have to get it out of the previous PDU. I'm not just going to give it to you. And crafting a spoof SMS send, so this is a deliver, but to send, that if you want to send it to your modem to send it out. Spoofing that is also possible, as if you saw my botnet talk, that's actually what it does, is spoof an SMS send so the user doesn't see it. So definitely all this stuff is possible, and actually having some sort of authentication, encryption, integrity checking, all this big buzzword CISSP stuff for our SMSs could actually fix all this stuff. But why do we care about SMS? Aside from my botnet, I mean, isn't SMS just, hi, let's meet up for lunch after George's awesome talk? So it was really great and the best one of DerbyCon, right? No laughter. So why would we actually need encryption for that? I mean, your average user probably isn't that worried about their SMS messages being read. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things that we would love to be privy to on people's SMS message. I know there are on mine, but your average user, do they really need this? Is it actually a big enough problem that the smartphone providers need to put encryption in place? For instance, if you really need encryption on your text messages, there's some add-on products already available. Whisper systems that they're text secure, which if you're speaking to someone else who uses text secure, you can encrypt over transit. So if you really need private text messages, there's already stuff available that people can do. So why would you need this infrastructure at all? Well, the problem is not the SMSs itself, it's the vendors that are using SMS. Vendors that actually need things like authentication and privacy and integrity, those buzzwords again, using SMS, which is not really meant for those things the way it is. For instance, your Google accounts give you the option of the two-factor authentication over SMS. Some of your other accounts do that as well. So it'll SMS you the one-time password, or sometimes on account setup, you add in a phone number, and then it sends you an SMS. If it doesn't really do checks, I actually saw this in the real world recently with a bank where when you set up an account, and then attackers who attack the bank just put in, prepaid phone numbers and went on their merry way. And this was all over SMS, so an example of why SMS might be a little more important. If you've ever lost access to your Google account while you're looking for a job, you can say that that's pretty awful, and definitely you'd want to protect that in some way. Mobile banking is a big one with this. I was actually really surprised how far mobile banking has gone since the last time I looked at it. I'm way too scared of cell phones to do anything like this, but mobile banking not only does, again, your one-time passwords for your two-factor sent over SMS, but I saw some examples of balance reporting. Might not want people to know that. And even saying yes to electronic bill paying, like we'll send you an SMS and you have to send it back saying yes in a certain way. I think I might want that to be private, and I certainly don't want somebody able to say yes for me. Somehow get into the bank and say, send all my money to this strange account. Yes. Okay. So it just seems like something that's worth protecting given the kind of services that are over SMS these days. Also another one, I don't want to pick on T-Mobile, but T-Mobile is who has my Android. The other ones might be doing this too. But vendor text messages. I got a text message and it was from some weird number and it said, "Congrats, vendor has this awesome product to protect your phone. Go here," and had a link to download it. And it sent me to a third-party app store. It didn't even send me to the Android market. And this was from T-Mobile, and it went to T-Mobile.com, so I could tell this was either somebody had hacked T-Mobile or it was legit. But, what if it was just a random link? And an average user, can they tell what is the actual domain and what's not? So this is actually an example that could be taken advantage of greatly. I could send out these messages here. Here's a great security app, and it's from your cell phone provider. Send you to a link and download it, and who knows? We'll talk about a little more about what apps can do to hurt your phone a little later on, but sounds kind of scary. And this actually happened to me a few weeks ago, which gave me the idea. The T-Mobile mobile security app came just that way, over a text message. There's really no authentication. There's no way for me to tell that that came from T-Mobile because I can send a message that looks just like that. So, again, the things that are moving into SMS, we just need to protect it more. So, encrypting SMS. So actually, this was not too hard to do. It didn't take very much code, and your vendors, I'm going to release the code for this if you want to look at it, but it's not a very big program, and our vendors could easily add this on to how they already do SMS. They won't have to add in a new app or anything. It won't break anything about the standard. It'll just provide you some encryption. The example actually uses a short key RSA, which is probably not the best. I've actually learned a lot about crypto as I've been working on this, and something like elliptic curve that was smaller would actually work better for this, but the example is what it is. It's just a proof of concept. We going to look at a demo of it. So actually what you want to do is intercept the SMS after the application, so your applications on your phones will still work the same way, send things down, and intercept it before it goes to the modem and goes out, then just encrypt it the same way we encrypt anything else, and adjust our SMS send PDU. We saw the PDU and we saw the data, so that instead of being E8, so on and so forth, it would be, you know, the encrypted value and then it encoded properly. And then send it over normally. It'll work fine. We'll see in the demo, you know, it just sees it as a different set of characters. And upon arrival, you know, we see the number, we check for the private key for that number, and then try and decrypt it. If it doesn't work, then something went wrong. It didn't actually come from that sender. You know, we have a lot of experience in encryption. We're not doing anything new here. This is the same way we use encryption on everything else. So then we just send it up to the user application, and they'd never know. Our demo, it actually looks kind of slow, but that's just how old that G1 is. So we're going to look at an example of this real quick. All right, so 2 phones, iPhone and G1. G1's actually the one doing encryption. Should be phone code for the iPhone too, but this is the one I made the video for. So we're just going to send a message normally. You get to see how hard it is for me to type on this thing. But I'm going to send it to the test iPhone. So that just works normally. But since it's using asymmetric cryptography, it's going to encrypt it, well, basically sign it, I guess is what they call it in asymmetric cryptography, with my private key, and then the iPhone will check it against my public key, though it's actually not going to decrypt, so you can see the encrypted message. But I send my usual message, hello, hello, and send it off, and it does look pretty slow. That's 1, the bad service in my apartment, and 2, the phone's really old. It doesn't actually seem to slow it down at all. So it goes through, and goes all the way around the world, and then gets back to my desk on the other phone, and it looks very encrypted, yes? We're actually going to look at it. So it actually makes it a lot longer, but the way these things seem to work in the block cipher, it stays that long for a certain length. It can get a lot longer than hello, hello before it does that. So there's your encrypted message. Again, this is just a proof of concept, so in the real world, you'd actually want that to decrypt because that doesn't show anything, but so that's how it works, and I'm going to release code for that if you want to take a look at it. So another thing that's interesting about our phones, applications. Applications seem to be a really big part of how vendors market their smartphones. Our apps are better than their apps by our phone. In fact, I was talking to a friend the other day, and he was like, yeah, I'd love to switch to Android, but then I'd have to switch all my apps, so I think I'll just stay with the iPhone. So apps are definitely a big part of the market. But they're also kind of the path of least resistance in a lot of cases about how to hack these phones. So we're going to look again, this is Android and iPhone mainly. So the Android App Store is kind of the open platform of the two. Anything really goes here, which we like as hackers, right? We like open source. So anyone can write an app and upload it to the Android market. You just have to pay a $25 sign-up fee, and then you can go on your merry way and upload whatever you want to the Android market. And anonymous sign-up is possible, you know, the prepaid credit cards and whatnot, just like prepaid phones. They don't really verify you. You can sign up as, you know, FUBAR or hello, hello for all they care, really. And there's no certificate authority. You can download something from a third-party app store and it will run. You know, as long as it can run on the Android and you say yes to installing it, it will run. So I can make an app and run it on my phone and, you know, put it up on the internet and tell you guys to download it, and then, or send out that SMS and pretend to be T-Mobile and be like, here's a security app that will save your phone, and put really scary stuff in it, which we saw Droid Dream, for example. That was a big one on the Android. Trojaned a bunch of apps. It was all over the news, so, you know, it happens. The iPhone App Store, on the other hand, more of a closed platform. You must have a developer's certificate to even run your code on your own device, I've found out. It seems like if you root it, you can make a C program and you can fake sign it, and I could get that to run, but I couldn't even get my app. I couldn't get Xcode to even export my app if I didn't pay my $99 a year. So our example of iPhone code that we're going to see earlier is going to be done on an emulator for that reason. But your identity is verified, of course. You know, if you steal someone's identity, big black hat stuff, I'm sure you can get onto the iPhone store and not have it traced back to you. But they do verify your identity based on your credit card. So they check who you are, and so they want to make sure everybody is doing what they should be. So all your code is reviewed when you go through. So if you do something really awesome, probably you could get malware onto the store. I have not tried. But all of it is reviewed, so there is a review process. If you do anything really obvious, I'm sure they'll catch it. So iPhone actually has a lot of security protections. These are not even all of them. I have a bibliography at the end of the slides, and these will be up. So if you want to do more reading on this, there's a paper from Black Hat this past year that really that's all they talked about, and it was great. They ran through a lot of these, but here's a few. For one, they have mandatory code signing. You can't even load new code at runtime. And the only things that can, obviously, something like mobile Safari has to because it's running dynamic web pages. But if you have an app, it can't load any new code, which is really annoying if you're trying to like Trojan the baseband, for instance, like I do. It just crashes and says, no, we don't do that. So it won't actually let you run anything that isn't signed by Apple. And there's some ASLR on your system binaries. They all have full ASLR. And some of the apps in 4.3 and later have them. You have to actually compile it with PIE support, which in that paper that's referenced, they actually looked through the top apps and saw that none of the top apps for iPhone were actually having the ASLR support right now, but it's speculated that in iOS 5 this will all be fixed and everything will have full ASLR support. But since you can't even load code, I think they're doing all right, you know? So, and your individual apps are sandbox with mandatory access control. You really can't overwrite it as far as anyone can tell. So, I think they're actually doing pretty good here as far as protections from malicious apps. Android security protections. This slide is a little bit shorter. So, but I mean, this has the good and the bad, right? I mean, a more restrictive platform is just harder to work with. And so, I mean, I think Android probably has the bigger market at this point, probably a lot for this reason, not because you can do malicious things, but you can do more good things with it too. But Android's main security protection, which we will talk about a little more in the fourth section on user awareness, is that users must accept the application permissions. If it's something, you know, if it's just something small, it may not ask. But when you install an Android application, if it does anything that might be considered scary to anyone, it will specifically say, I need permission to do this. We saw this problem in Droid Dream, of course, because it was like a game or an active desktop, and it wanted access to everything, your contact information, sending SMS, etc. And that should raise a red flag, right? So we'll see whether that's working a little bit later on. But that's the main security protection that Android has, is that users have to say yes. As far as I can tell, I've not been able to, aside from breaking out of the application and becoming root and then doing whatever you want, but inside of the application, I haven't found any way to access SMS, for instance, if I haven't specifically asked the user to do so. Once I've rooted the phone, well, that's another story, but I can't in the app do anything that the user hasn't specifically said I could. So really, it's the user's fault, right? No. So, Android insecurity. It actually, we saw with the iPhone, it won't let you load new code. I found this out the hard way. My phone kept crashing and I couldn't figure out why. Well, let's try, because I'm trying to load new dynamic code at load time, and the iPhone, oh, we're in a bad state now, go down. Android doesn't care. You can load new code into anything. Any app that I download, we've actually seen some research examples of this. Blast Shmoocon, John Overhyde, and Jack Lanier did the Rootstrap app in their talk, which is, they did it with the Twilight botnet, so it was like, download this app and it'll show you new pictures of the Twilight movie. And sadly, that got a lot of downloads. So I guess it proved two things. One, you can add new code at runtime, and two, users will download anything. So it doesn't even have to be that cool of an app. I don't know. So the overall idea is put up a cool app, have it do its cool thing, like show Twilight pictures, and then have cool stuff running in the background, like They called it Rootstrap because what it did was actually call out and download any new shell code to try and root the Android, like the syn page from 2009 was in there and a couple others. And then we just try and run those against Android, and if something worked, then yay, we're out of the app. So it just kind of attacked it. And if anything new came to light, it would be uploaded to the server, and so this application could just run for years until it managed to find something that worked. And so your sandbox is also kind of flawed in Android. It runs in this VM that seems to think it can keep your apps apart, but any app can exploit a kernel vulnerability. If the app is on the phone, it can, for instance, Rootstrap, that's what it does. It local privilege escalation, the same way you see on your desktop computers. That's all it's doing. And any app can do this. Whereas on your iPhone, you start trying to run this new code, it dies, and sometimes you have to reinstall all your firmware and lose everything. But yeah, on the Android, it's really, there's not much security against these apps. And again, apps can have any permission they want. There's no oversight. Android doesn't go through everything. There's a lot more apps out there on the Android store. Can you imagine how long it would take to go through and see, well, this is a game. Why does it need to send SMS? Again, if the user says you can, you can. You can ask for any permission you want. Then that's what Droid Dream did, which was a big one. It Trojaned some apps and then asked for permissions that those apps didn't need, but it did because it had to do malicious things. So a little more insecurity here. iPhone insecurity. Again, not all the apps are compiled with full ASLR, but with all the other checks in place, I don't really see that as a big problem. But my main beef with the iPhone store is that if there is a security problem in your application and you're a good developer and you want to fix it and get it out to your users, you have to sit in the queue for a while just with your patch and wait for the slow review process while all your users are getting attacked. So there's an up and a downside to the review process in that case. So that's all we have for apps. Little pros and cons there of each store. But now let's talk about some software updates. So smartphones are mini computers. That's how they're marketed. Your Android is basically just a Linux kernel with some stuff on it. Your iPhone is iOS. Your BlackBerry is God knows what. And your Windows, somebody should give me a BlackBerry. Everybody's always like, what have you done with BlackBerry? And I'm like, I wouldn't even know how to make BlackBerry turn on at this point. I would definitely like to see the BlackBerry. But anyway, they're all subject to security flaws. I'm sure even BlackBerry is. I mean, it runs a CPU and you give it instructions. I mean, it all works the same way. So it's all exploitable. For example, our SynPage Linux kernel exploit from 2009 can actually still get some of your smartphones if you don't update them. This was actually ported, the same kernel vulnerability exploit was ported to Android in 2009 and could hit the Android the exact same way. Not that big of a port. If you look at the code, it's practically the same thing, except for some offsets. So, and that's just showing exactly, it's not even you have to learn a new skill in order to exploit these. It's just like working as we have exploiting desktop computers for the past 20 years or so. And your software updates come out for your smartphones and, they add new features, but they also address security issues. So it's exactly the same sort of problem we've run into with anything else. So how smartphones update? There's a lot of text there because it goes through everything. Android, if you have your Android phones, you get your updates pushed over the air. It shows up on my phone and says, hey, there's updates, give me some interesting info about it. I click yes or no, and it'll update my phone, and I might lose my root if I do. But, So iPhone, a little bit different. It updates through iTunes, so you have to attach it to the computer. I've heard after I did this, after I made my demo and everything, people are like, that they fixed that in iOS 5. So they are actually going to move to over the air, at least they say, on iOS 5, so moving more towards Android. But right now, you have to attach it to your computer, and I know, I only attach it to my computer when I want to update my library of music, which since the advent of YouTube, who needs to anyways? So it's up to the user to attach it to their computer that has iTunes, so it'll tell them about the update. And Windows Mobile is very similar. It uses a program called ActiveSync, which does pretty much the same thing as iTunes. It syncs your contacts and things So whenever you attach to a computer, if there's an update, it'll tell you. BlackBerry, I think, is probably the worst at this. It checks, you have to actually go to the BlackBerry website and ask them if there's updates for your platform, and then download it, and then connect your phone. So I don't think the average user is going to remember to do that. I don't think I would remember to do that. So another thing, a side note, why are Android updates so slow? I want to go with Android here and say they have the best update system, but you always hear, oh, the update comes out, it's released by Google, and then 6 months later, my phone still hasn't updated. Something's obviously wrong with this over-the-air thing. Why isn't it going out to everyone? Well, it's actually very simple why this is. So Google puts out the new version, and then I get it because I have a Nexus S, and it's directly from Google. But you don't get it if you don't have a Google phone, because it has to go to the other platform makers, since anybody can make an Android. And then they'll actually port this new version with their custom UI and their apps and everything on it, and then they'll finally send it out to you. So if there was a security issue in it, it might not be so good to use this system. But for instance, previous updates have taken over 6 months for someone to put it out, so hopefully the people will know that there's a big security update in this one and they should push it out quickly. So that's actually why the Android updates are so slow. So I like Android's way. I think pushing it over the air, if not the entire update itself, at least informing the users over the air, hey, there's a system update, do what you will with it, because I don't always update mine right away for whatever reason. But I think users should have the option and should know immediately whether or not there is an update. So I actually came up with a simple solution for this. Again, not very hard. Didn't take too long. Not much code. Wouldn't be hard for smartphone vendors to add this. And I'm going to release this code as well. And so actually what it does is it's just an application that checks against the server and says, what's the current update, and then says, hey, what's my current version, and compares the two, and if they're not the same, it pops up a user little message box thing and says, hey, update me, and gives some details about the update. So you might still have to attach to your computer, but at least you'll know. You'll have that option. So I think that's probably the best way to do it. Even if they can't send it over the air for whatever reason, it's definitely telling the user that there is a security update is, I think, preferable. For instance, iPhone seems to have all this beef about you jailbreaking your phone, but then they don't tell you that there's an update available that will stop you from jailbreaking it. It doesn't make any sense to me. So, what? They do? Okay, so Windows phones are actually moving towards this as well. But let's look at our little demo anyways, because it's pink. We have to look at the pink one. Update me. So, right, this is on an emulator because I don't want to pay $99. So, see, it says update me, and it has a pretty pink background. So it does it at startup, and then it checks periodically, or you can just hit the button and ask it. So it actually just checks. So again, this actually took me a while to develop because I wasn't used to developing iPhone apps. But once I figured it out, it's just a few lines of code. It's like, oh, call up to the server, what's my system version, put up a message box. So this wouldn't be hard, but it looks like Windows Mobile is using this, and iPhone is also going to use this. So maybe just BlackBerry needs to use this model. What are we doing for time? All right, my big one, always my favorite, user awareness fails. We've seen some great strides in computer security, I think. It seems like, I talked to my grandmother and she's talking about viruses and not clicking on emails, and it just seems to have gotten out there in a big way that there definitely are security threats. Don't click on this random link in your email. I guess I put it this way. Would you ever, if you were a boss at a company, would you ever tell all your employees to go out and find everything on the internet that they could possibly find that looks cool and download it and install it to their computers? Would anybody do that? No. Why not? Because it might be malware, right? If you just go out and do that. The problem is that's exactly what your smartphones are telling you to do. That's how they market them. Our apps are great. Go out on the App Store and download all the apps you can find. Buy our phones because our phones have better apps. Our app market is better. Well, that's exactly what we're telling them to do. Go out and buy or download everything they can possibly find and install it on their phone. So for the same reason this doesn't work on your computer so well, if you want to not have viruses, it's the same problem with your smartphone. And we're not getting that out to the users. We're still seeing it as a phone, even though it does everything my computer does and sometimes more. My phone knows more about me than my computer does. If you broke into my phone, and probably most of you as well, that would be kind of game over. It knows everything about you. So I think definitely to the end user, as we're giving them all this functionality, we owe them a little more support on how to use this thing appropriately. Apps have too many permissions. This is going to be focused on Android, but Android apps can request any permissions they want. And as long as the user says yes, you're allowed to do it, no oversight. So again, it's up to the user. If the user says no, well then they can't install the apps. For instance, I wanted TweetDeck on my phone, and TweetDeck said it wanted access to my phone calls. What did I do? I tweeted about how stupid that was, but I still installed it. So, exactly, yeah. So if you want to use the apps, you have to say yes. Some things like CyanogenMon or Whisper Core will let you switch which permissions you want on and off, but it might cause it to crash. Probably not if it's something it doesn't actually need. But on the whole, like if you don't root your phone, if you're just an end user, you either take it or leave it. And if all your friends are using Foursquare, you're going to be using it too. Foursquare example, it would need GPS, obviously. It needs to know where you are. That would be a legitimate function of the app. But does it need to send SMS messages? I don't know if it does. I don't use Foursquare. Darren, does it? Yes, okay, it does ask for SMS. So is this system working of having the users pick the permissions or decide yes or no? Well, top downloaded Android app of all time. That's a rather large list. Let's look at that list of permissions that the Facebook app requires. It has to edit and read SMS messages, send SMS, receive SMS, modify and delete your USB storage contents, so overwrite your file system, prevent the phone from sleeping so it can run down your battery, write sync settings, so I don't really know what that does, GPS data, services that cost you money, which is sending premium SMSs basically, acts as an account authenticator and manage your accounts on your phone, read and write your personal information, so it's got your contact info, and it can make phone calls, it can read your phone state and its identity, which is like your phone's little password. If you actually, Chris Padgett talks about all that stuff in his talk, which is in the bibliography, the slides for that. So, you know, your personal identifiers of your phone and why you might not want to lose them. But yes, Facebook can access those and full network access. See, I have Facebook on my computer and it doesn't have a contacts list or a phone state or SMSs, and Facebook works just fine using full network access. So this is the top downloaded app of all time and it requires all these permissions. So I'm going to say no, this is not working. So, user awareness fail there. Also, jailbreaking gone wild. So when I first got my Android G1 and somebody told me I could run Debian on it, I was so excited. So I got one and I went and looked on all the mod forums about how to root it, and it was like, push, what does it say? Go to the home screen and hit enter twice and say telnet D. So basically I exploited the bug myself. So I knew that I didn't load any malware onto it. Current version of jailbreaking, here we are a couple of years later. You go to this website and you say yes to running this application that's made by some anonymous person on the internet, and then it jailbreaks your phone. What else is it doing? Probably a lot of the stuff we see in the wild for jailbreaking is probably kind of malicious. We know some of it's good. We see the guy on the news, right? He can't be a black hat, he's in the news. I don't know. So I think definitely this is kind of scary. I don't want to just run any code. For instance, for any iPhone research that I do, because of the mandatory code signing, this is basically what I do. I root the phone and then put malicious activity in it for my botnet, right? So nothing's stopping your jailbreakers from doing the exact same thing. How this works right now is like the current jailbreak me is it puts up a bad PDF, which since PDF viewer can load dynamic code because it has to put up a PDF, right? And it's a bad PDF and it breaks out of that and turns off the mandatory code signing. So now it can do anything. So I can see why iPhone's a little scared of jailbreaking, not just because they don't want you to use your phone to its full capabilities, but because that's actually the main way to get an iPhone owned. I actually, at DEF CON this year, Nick Prococo in his talk said, if you want to get an Android phone hacked, give it an app. If you want to do an iPhone, definitely give it a jailbreak, and I would say this is the case. So again, iPhones probably need their updates rather quickly. So, people jailbreak their phones, they go out to the internet and download something, and God knows what they're getting, So definitely need to get some user awareness there. Yeah, rooting's so cool, and, you got to be careful what you install after you root it, but what about the rooting process itself? So raising that user awareness, I think, is very important for this. That's always been my thing when people are like, so how do you prevent your botnet from working? I always say, well, user awareness. If users don't install a bad app, then there will be no botnet. So we need to stop with our download our apps. Our apps are better. Yay, our phones are so great because we have better apps. Commercials, you've seen them, they're out there. Again, that's just telling users to go out and download everything off the internet, which we don't do that anymore. So we definitely need to stop with that. And our ethical rooters and jailbreakers programs, they need to inform users of the risks. We need to get it out there that this can actually hurt you as well as help you. And if you're in an organization, we see it a lot with your computer user awareness training. We need to add something specifically if smartphones are allowed on your network. If you're allowed to get your corporate email on your smartphone, then you definitely need to add something to your user awareness training of this, because again, your smartphones are open to the exact same kind of attacks, perhaps more attacks, and it's just not getting the same level of awareness from our users about how to take care of them. And if it's got all your corporate secrets on it, you might want to take care of that. So how to contact me, I'm Georgia Weidman. I work for NeoHapsis. You have my work email and my GermNoobs email, my website, germnoobs.com, and the code slides and a white paper about this and the videos will all be online, probably Monday. And Vincent Cadman on Twitter. Again, code and slide on websites. Thank you all for getting up early in the morning to hear me talk.